Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. Welcome to the club. Write poems for your crush and experience the terror of school romance in this critically acclaimed psychological horror story. Enter the #1 psychological horror experience. Don't know what metric they're using to put that out there. Welcome to a terrifying world of poetry and romance. Write poems for your crush and erase any mistakes along the way to ensure your perfect ending. Now's your chance to discover why Doki Doki Literature Club is one of the most beloved psychological horror games of the decade. You play as the main character who reluctantly joins the literature club in search of a romantic interest. With every poem you write and every choice you make, you'll charm your crush and begin to unfold the horrors of school romance. Do you have what it takes to crack the code of dating sims and get the perfect ending? Now the original mind-shattering DDLC experience is packed with tons of new features and content exclusive to Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. We've got 6 new side stories about friendship and literature, totaling hours of new content, not a specific number being wheeled out or close to it. 100 unlockable images, including new game art, wallpapers, never seen before, concept sketches and more. 26 total music tracks, including 13 all new unlockable songs. A built-in DDLC music player to unwind with your favourite songs in a custom playlist or loop a single track forever. High fidelity visual upgrade with all artwork now supporting full HD 1080p. I'll stop there because it goes on for more. But at the end it says, this game is not suitable for children or those who are easily disturbed. So off you go.
Right.
That's what you get.
One question. What are we doing here then?
Well, I've had it for ages, you see.
No, not an answer.
What do you mean?
The fact that you've already got it is not what are we doing here then.
So here's something I need to... So basically, there's 2 versions of this game.
Right.
You've got Doki Doki Literature Club, which was the original. That came out and was a free download. Originally, I think it was only on itch.io, which is like an indie showcase. You can upload your game there and people download them and whatnot. Eventually, it got traction and ended up getting a Steam release. And then years later, they did a port to consoles and this enhanced version, which is Plus, Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, and charged. I think it's £11.40 now in the Epic store, which is where I had it. I didn't buy it. I got it for free as part of this greatest deal ever in gaming with Epic, where you just get a free game a week. Sometimes it's stuff that you may have been interested in. But this is the Plus version. I have played the original as well. I played the original, then was like, oh, there's a Plus version. I might go and buy that when it's on sale. And then I looked and I already had it in my Epic Game Store library. So I was like, you know what, I'll just play it back to back just to see differences and whatnot.
So you played the first, like the original and this Plus one back to back?
Pretty much, yeah. Maybe a couple of days break.
Well,
just
to
get away from the horror of it all. But yeah, there was no other game slotted in between this. It was just let's hammer this out. And I went much further with Plus in terms of experimenting with different endings and fucking about and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know if that answers the question or not.
No, it doesn't. So I can understand why you would. There's an element of this where I understand why you would do it, because it's a narrative. Well, it's a fucking storybook or whatever.
Visual novel.
Visual novel, right? There we go. But that fits into your. You like different endings. You like story arcs. You like different story arcs. You like doing all that sort of stuff. I get it, but fucking high school romance. It
just a container.
Naturally...
That's just a theme. That's just a container. It's just a theme. It's just a setting for what can unfold. On the face of
Yeah.
it, they even play into this. So the reason why the original was never charged for is because the guy who made it kind of thought it's advertising itself as a dating sim, but it's got a lot more to it. You know, it's not what you would typically expect if you were into those type of games. And he felt almost guilty that if people bought it on that presumption, they're going to get like just a normal dating sim with perhaps a few twists along the way, they would just be horrified by this experience. So he put it out for free. That's why that first one is free initially, is because he knew he was kind of... There'd be certain people that would be misled by this. But what happened is it kind of got out into the gaming world, started picking up lots of hype, clicks and whatnot. And as people who don't normally play visual novels, who don't normally play dating sims, thought, well, I've got to try this out. All I've been told is I need to try this. They get in it, they get hooked. That then spreads the wildfire more. And then years down the line, we get a paid version that comes out with some added story bits. So yeah, it's a bit of it's a strange story how we even got here for the game itself, and it all kind of stems from them not wanting to gain monetarily without people sort of, you know, not to mislead people essentially. By the time Plus comes out, I think it says psychological horror experience. So at that stage, if you're completely misled by the trailer, which subtly hints at things, but it's still, as you would have seen, comes across as a very standard anime visual novel dating sim. But they put the warning in there that it's not suitable for children, those that are easily disturbed. They put psychological horror experience in the marketing and in the store page. So I guess that people that are now paying for it must understand that it's got more to it than what the trailer might say.
So talk to that then, because I assume this is part. I mean, obviously, you know, you think you said it scored well and that it's sort of, I'll say critically acclaimed. That's
87
probably not
on
a title that it's
OpenCritic,
got. But it's obviously a bit of a. Everyone seems to like it, so that obviously, you know, we've said before, that's usually a good barometer, a little check, a little temperature check on that OpenCritic of what's going on and whether it's worth looking at or not. That's obviously a high score. Like whatever way you look at it, that's a high score, right? So we'll call it that. But there's loads of Tut that gets high scores.
Yep.
Right? That doesn't necessarily mean we pick it up and we play it. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what is it about this? Is it the whole package that's made you pick this up, or is it this psychological horror element that adds the X factor and this sort of like, it doesn't look like it's got that, so where is it? I'm going to play it, sort of thing.
It's merely the intrigue of it, knowing that it's not what it says in the tin, and that it's got more to it was enough for me, and that was it. I knew it was short as well. We're talking like, I don't know, like to get all the endings. I think I did it in like 5-6 hours. Like, because it lets you basically, we can maybe go into this deeper later, but you can skip through stuff that you'd experienced in terms of the text. You haven't got to read it again, and just skips through, and then you get to the points where there's new decisions or text to be made. So really, I knew it was short. So I thought, well, again, no harm, no foul generally with these sorts of games. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Not a lot. And I just knew that it had more to it. I didn't know what, I didn't know how. I just remember hearing it on the grapevine many years ago, adding it to my Steam library many years ago, and then just never bothering, because I was like, can I be asked? And then really what unlocked it was going through those Pony Islands, you know, the Hexes of Society, doing these smaller type games, and thinking, well, why not give this a roll? I've never really played a full-blown visual novel before. And even though this is kind of masquerading as one, it's not one that you'd likely to have played before. It's not in the same genre even. You know, psychological horror, for example, is not really something you expect in that type of game. So I thought it's got enough connective tissue to stuff that I genuinely enjoy. I like to be surprised, and I'm curious when it comes to these experimental or off-the-wall type games. And that's how I got there. It's just Ronnie getting intrigued, knowing that he should play it.
I am intrigued here because when you watch the trailer, and I would encourage everyone that listens to this to watch the trailer. It's only like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes or something, and it just looks like a kids game, like as you say, a kids But then there's this like psychological horror, and I'm like, surely the only psychological horror is the thought of reliving childhood or teenage dating again, because it was a horrific thing to do. I think
It's cruel, really, when you think about it, isn't it? You get all these small humans, and you chuck them in this big old building for most of their early lives, and say, deal with that.
Does he fancy me? Does she fancy me? Or is she interested? Is she not? You text for fucking God knows how long, and then get nothing out of it, and you think, well, that was a waste of time. Like on the phone, doing like. And then out of nowhere, you get dumped, and this, that, and the other. And then 2 weeks later, they're going out with someone else in the front. And you're like, well, what's going on here then? Like, but there's no, when you look back on it, there's actually like very little, if any, emotion in it. Like, you literally like can't say heartbroken, like looking back on it. But it's such a weird thing. And I was like, is that the psychological horror? Like this idea of reliving all that shit again? Like,
no, I mean, in short, no. I won't divulge exactly what the horror is. I think a lot of the game, I wish somehow I'd found this in 2017 or 18 on itch.io and gone into it hoping for a dating sim, and then just being dealt this, because it would have just been, you'd been like, oh my goodness, you had no idea. Whereas now it's out, it says it in the fucking marketing, you know something's up, so the kind of part of the surprise is lessened somewhat. But no, it's not just the general horror of being a failed dating king in school. It's a lot more deeper than that, and has deals with some quite serious and traumatic stuff. So that's why they've put those trigger warnings, or whatever they're called these days. Is that what you call them, or is that offensive to call them trigger warnings? Well, or are they referred to as that?
I guess that's what they are.
I know you love all this stuff, so I thought you might have.
Yeah, ultimately it is, isn't it? It's basically, I mean, I think for the right reasons, actually, in this. Like, I think, you know, this, if you watch something or saw the content, you think, oh, like, I'll let my 8-year-old play that. I mean, I wouldn't, but like,
yeah,
some people might think no harm. Then all of a sudden, whatever happens unlocks a
true. Even when you
nightmares or something, I don't know.
When you start the game up, it even says, just so you know, you'll be dealing with themes of X, Y, and Z. Confirm, press yes. So yeah, they do signpost what may come, which again probably loses a little bit of the initial surprise, but still very powerful nonetheless. And probably, like you said, it's better to be safe than sorry than letting some kid go on this, and then just being traumatized with what they've had to sit through, because I honestly think they would be, with what's going on here. It really isn't
unbelievable.
It really isn't up for youngsters.
So I don't know where to start with this, because I think my expectation is a lot of the success of this game, if people have liked it and when people have liked it, has been around this mystery element. So we've got to, I assume, talk to it, talk to what you liked about it without heavily spoiling or alluding to what that psychological horror element is. So let's just kick this off with, what did you like about it? So what were the good parts? So we ain't got combat, I assume. We ain't got any of this action, like control mechanisms and fucking 4K graphics going on.
Well, it said 1080p. That's been upgraded as well. So that's what you get for £11.39. Is full HD graphics on these 1440p or 4K monitors.
Really annoys me at the moment. Fucking YouTube, for some reason, sets my default resolution to 720. Right? And I'm like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
It looks like shit. Like nowadays, 720 looks like absolute garbage. The bare minimum has got to be 1080.
Doesn't hold up, does it?
In my view. So they've upgraded it to the bare minimum, which is more, to be fair, than YouTube's giving me by default.
Yeah, I mean, mine tends to do 1080p, sometimes 4K, depending. Sometimes it is the output of the video, though. Someone might have uploaded that in 720p. I mean, no one in their right. For like a movie trailer, absolutely not. That should be.
It's 1440. Right. So the video you can max out to 4. I'm not on premium either, right? So you might get additional options by going premium, but like a standard thing for some reason, it doesn't do it on all channels, but some it goes, that one you can have at 720. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why have we decided this then? And I've gone in, changed the setting to say like maximum quality, and it still comes back to do that. Really annoys me.
If it's set on auto, sometimes it will. I mean, this is a joke because I know what speed internet you've got, but it will look at the bandwidth and say this is what you can handle. And I know that you've got that fibre, so that it should be on full whack all the time. But it could be there. It could be their fucking end, wouldn't it? The back end of theirs not picking up or allowing you to experience the full kit and caboodle. But
it's a fucking disgrace. It really is. I really wish we could just say maximum, and I'll be choosing whether to pull it down or not. But there we go.
So what do they like?
Yes.
Well, actually, I'll tell you what. I don't remember playing a visual novel before, really. For no other reason than I don't really see too many of them, to be quite honest. There's one called Steins Gate, which I looked at not long ago. And there's Danganronpa, which is kind of a visual novel, but not. I mean, you guess the trouble. People get all funny about what is and what isn't. But generally, I haven't really played these types of games. What I will say is at a base level, is I actually found that part of it quite. I enjoyed it. I just enjoyed just sort of clicking through, chatting to these ladies, making seemingly very small decisions, doing the sort of poem bits. But I just like the simplicity of it all, to be honest. It's completely not taxing other than the narrative side of things, but the actual experience, there's no stress. You read at your own pace, good little bit of music playing. And really, for something that's for a vehicle, as in a visual novel, that's so simple, it literally is still images, text, not even voiceover, just you read it, you click through, you get a chance eventually to make decisions at certain points, say this, say that, choose this, choose that. But for something so simple, in comparison to a lot of the other stuff that I generally play, the fact that it got over the characters that are in the game very well was surprising. You know, you thought you can't really... How can you care for these fucking poetry writing ladies when they're just these little anime caricatures in a way? Like, I definitely think part of the game is taking the piss a little bit out of these dating sims, but it gets the characters over even just in this simple vehicle. Then the types of issues that they do face into, again, in a very simplistic vehicle which has no right to make you have any sort of care in the world about it, it pulls it off again. Or at least it did for me. And that's really what I think surprised me the most, was actually how engaged I was for something that
what
really,
is
on the
simple
outset,
and effective.
It done it, yeah.
We've talked about this before, right? Is that there's this habit, I think, in gaming broadly, and I've referenced it specifically with Call of Duty, but it doesn't just happen in that game. It happens all the time. That more equals better.
Yeah.
The more shit we add on, the better it will be.
Yep.
And one thing that I miss sometimes about gaming is how simple it used to be.
Yeah.
Like how pick up and play stuff was. You know, there were some games, you know, fighting games and things like that, where you needed to know the buttons and mechanics and weak points and stuff. I'm not saying it's always been simple, but there's so much going on nowadays and so many different things to consider. Like sometimes it feels a bit overwhelming. And I think the joy that I get from some of the indie games is going back to the simplicity of what makes some games enjoyable. I think some games just want to be bastard hard for the sake of it. I think, you know, some games don't. And I think there's still a joy that I have about, as you get a bit older maybe as well, like this idea that you don't want all that stress all the time. Like life is stressful. And sometimes when you want to sit down and play a game, you want something that will bring you something a bit different. Change your pace, something that can do something different. And I think my experience nowadays is that AAA games specifically are very involved, require investment, they require time, you know, thinking about story arcs, what items you're going to take, what paths you're going to take, and do all this stuff all the time. It's sometimes nice to just sit down and just be part of a story that a game's taking you through, and you can sort of sit back and relax and do it. And I think that is where indie seems to excel these days. I think it's filling that gap.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely those examples out there. I've been on this little stretch of doing Pony Island, the Hex, even going back as far as like Jusant, which was a bit more involved, but still a very simple idea, just mechanically very sound. And then this, now the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, I was like, yeah, this just felt like a natural step, because it's just, as you said, low tax on the gameplay mechanic front. Now, it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily low tax narrative what you get here. Like, it's heavy, so that's
a lot
of reading. Yeah, I don't read as it is, so actually maybe it's good for me just to read a little bit now and again. But I mentioned on the Hex review that I started Inscription and then binned it after four and a bit hours, because I just weren't, it was too involved. And that's not a particularly advanced game, but I could see where Mullins had gone from Pony Island to Hex, and then the complexity then ramped up a bit more. And I was like, I'm not really up for this. Yeah. I didn't realise it really at the time, but I call back now, and I jumped into this, which is very simplistic, and I was able to just to take straight to it and had no quabbles about playing it. Whereas Inscription, I was like, you know what, I just need to be in a different mindset to be tackling this, because it's asking a lot of my brain at times. It's asking me to think too much almost. I can't stay in this mindset forever, but it's nice to scatter like a nice little few month period of just lower taxing games.
You've done a lot of quite long games and invested games of late. Sort of probably first quarter of this year has been heavily invested in a lot of that stuff. So you don't, and I find this, and we always talk about the palette cleansers, but it's not just like, sometimes you don't want to just do one palette cleanser and move on to another big one. Yeah. I mean, it depends what's out there and what's on the old backlog and stuff, but it is nice to sort of just play a few different shorter bits before you then delve into something a bit more intense and longer. So especially if you've got them in the backlog. I mean, I'm going to finish Jusant. I'm going to give Beat Cop a go. I've got the Coffee Simulator and stuff like that. I'm going to give them a real good kick in. I think there's some DLC coming down the line for Harry Potter. And then I'm going to be looking at so I haven't really played a AAA or a single player, like a long single player game. I think the last one was probably Spider-Man 2. Yeah. I'm going to say, which was bloody ages ago. So I think you do just need to cleanse yourself a bit sometimes, and these little games are good to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I just think that how they got their point across and simply in this simple vehicle was actually, it's quite eye-opening. I was like, actually, there's more here, because although this is, the mystery behind it carries a lot of the weight, still the actual way in which they communicate it to you is no different from another visual novel, really. So again, if there's a compelling story arc to go on, I may be going back in to pick out maybe one or two of these a year and put them into rotation. One thing I will say, other than just being really impressed by that particular element, is that the issues that they do decide to tackle head on, like the heavy, hardcore issues, this might be one of the best, well, it is one of the best representations of those that I've come across in a game. I get a lot of games have tried to tackle similar themes and subjects and whatnot. And usually they do a good job. This is not, very rarely have I seen a game really drop the ball with some serious subject matter. Normally when they're going to take it on, they're equipped to do it. But this stands almost, it's up the top somewhere. It's in that top tier of landing that, and you feel the impact of it. And again, the vehicle it comes in, you wouldn't expect that, but they're able to do it through clever writing and misdirection and other bits and pieces there that will, in my opinion, made that element of it really, really hit home. And it's not comfortable, but
Interesting.
I've said it before. You're there to sometimes just experience things rather than laugh at it and smile and joke along as you collect your next coin with Mario.
Completely different vibe.
Yeah. That's what annoys me when people say, "Well, you don't need to worry about the story in games." I was like, "Well, we all be playing Mario still. That's what that was. That's just a game for a game. Why can't it be more?"
Mate, there's deep lore in Mario.
Sexist, if you ask me. Patriarch. Go down that fucking theory.
It's definitely
Hancock
shows.
involved.
Well, they wouldn't like the hero and the sort of. If Disney got their hands on it, then they'd completely rewrite that. But anyway, so is there anything that you didn't like? Obviously, it sounds like there's some hard hitting topics in it.
Yeah.
But is there anything about the game that you're like, hang on a minute, why have we done it like this?
There's a couple of things. One, that obviously the reading part of it can get a bit tiresome. Particularly when you go back in to experiment. Now, you can skip through a lot of it, but like I said, you still have to read the new bits, and you can get burnt out very easily, is what I discovered towards the back end of like pushing to not manipulate the game, to get as many ends as I could and unlock. Really, the only reason I did that is because these side stories I talked about, this extra lore, I thought before I played it was going to be woven into the game. Like, scene 1 would be play out the same at the opening, and then, there'll be like a little bonus scene 2, which we didn't have before, and then it'll go back to the normal game. Do you know what I mean? It'd be like woven in, so it'd be a seamless experience. It's actually not. They're actually like a prequel. They're in their own menu. It's a prequel before the events of this, and you have to unlock them by getting the specific endings relating to the specific characters. Right. So at that point, I was a bit like, it's a little bit frustrating to have to go through all this. Now, I did get to then, see everything essentially from that perspective, but I didn't like that the side stories weren't just open to start with. Like, 'cause it's really good stuff, and it would just enhance your understanding of the game and the characters and the lore itself. But you have to jump through all these hoops to unlock it, and I was a bit like, that's a little bit frustrating. And if we're looking at a full ending perspective, to get kind of like the big coup de grace, it's not signposted very well at all on how you'd manage that. So I would have perhaps been looking at making that a little bit more obvious to the player, and so that there's less frustration if you are looking for that. Because a lot of people actually will probably play this and just be done after the first playthrough, which is actually valuable. I wouldn't necessarily dissuade someone from doing that. But if you start to go deeper, because you want these side stories, for example, probably going to need some sort of guide just to double check what you're doing is correct, because you don't want to be resetting the game and then having to start all over again and all that sort of stuff. You can kind of use the save system to your advantage in that sense. But it's not really explained very well. So I can see a lot of people never finding that, and then looking at the side stories and think, you know what, I'll just watch a YouTube video because I can't unlock them. I can't figure out why. So that was that's probably one of the main blowers, really. And that's Ronnie trying to go deeper than he would normally. So is he to blame, perhaps? But I think if you're doing side content, why lock it behind such a not annoying, sort of a hoop jumping wall? Just chuck it in the menu and I'll have a look at it. Thank you. And there's no interactivity with those ones, I don't think. I think they're literally just stories that you click through. I don't even think you can interact with them other than just moving the text along. So it's not like an enhanced or an extra part of the quote unquote game part. It's it's literally you run through stories, the 6 stories that are there. So probably a little bit of a stinger there for people who are looking for something a little bit more meaty.
Right. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on as part of this that we haven't covered?
I'd say that the Plus version, I played it on the PC via this Epic Game Store. I would say that definitely enhances the game. It it makes more sense with the way they structure it and the way it's kind of set up and the shell they kind of put over it. It's small. It's very subtle. Most people won't know. But because I played the Steam version, which wasn't Plus, that was the free version, and then played the paid version, I was like, oh, that's different. And knowing what I know, that makes a lot of sense, actually. It's really quite clever, the way in which they've done that. The game is very layered as well. It's layered. We've had these Mullins games with the fuckery. Expect that to happen here as well, and that's part of the experience. So you're already sitting there knowing you're not going to be walking into this literature club and walking out of your favourite girl, and it's going to be a smooth ride. Like, it's not. So the game really does a great job of actually being much more layered than what you'd imagine. And it's probably deeper than what I've even taken back from it. Like, there's more to get. I could go back in and find more unlockable bits and pieces by doing specific things. I'm not going to, because at some point you have to draw the line. But there's a lot there. There's a lot more than what you would ever think from that little 2-minute trailer of those girls dancing around and whatnot, and their little still faces. Like, there is just a lot more to it. It stunned me, that
trailer. Like, I was like, how can this be this? Like, how can we go from this to the word psychological horror? Like, it's just so bizarre to me. And I was like thoroughly confused by what I watched, because it doesn't really do anything. All you see is these anime girls pottering around, and it's like, I don't know what to do with that. Like,
you can write the poems, mate. Choose your words.
I don't know what you're selling to me. No. I literally had no idea. I don't know what the product is. Like, it's such a bizarre...
That's why he didn't originally sell it. That's why, because he knew that weren't it. And I guess...
I still think there could be like 2 seconds of what, but maybe that would be even too much. Just something that gives me an idea of what the...
It said it's not suitable for children, and it says it's a psychological horror, but the tone of the trailer is completely different. At that point, as a consumer, you've got to make your own. You've got to read between the lines and think, well, it's clearly not what's being sold there. And then people that take the plunge will find out and either turn it off or continue down the rabbit holes.
Well, yeah, still just highly bizarre.
It is. It's very bizarre. It's very good, though. Very, 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 very good. And it's not a game for everyone. It's the last thing, really, before we go into formalities. That you have to be... I love the term open-minded because it suggests people are closed-minded, but you have to be sort of willing to do something probably different, because a lot of people that are listening to this probably haven't played a visual novel before. So first of all, you've got to get over that hurdle. Then you've got to get over the anime aspect. Then you've got to get over the dating sim aspect. Like, you just got to trust in the process, as some of these managers like to say. And you'll be rewarded if you can
trust the process.
If you can stomach it. But it's really not a game for everyone. People out there by now know that when I say that, it ain't a Biff game. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Not a lot of games. It's a Biff game these days, but
yeah, I don't know what is. I don't know what that is. Okay, well, let's move to the formalities, shall we? I mean, I assume it's not going in the big yellow storage or whatever we call it.
They ain't sponsored it yet. You can't call it that. There are other self-storages available, but no, it's not going to go in the self-storage outside in the car park.
It's going to go into the gallery, so I'll hand over to you to decide exactly where.
It's tough, really.
Well,
it ain't tough, actually.
It's getting clapped in.
It is getting clapped in. Really?
It's just a book. So
it is just a book. So
there's people outside protesting, saying that these ain't games, they shouldn't be allowed in.
They're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. And just to slight them, Doki Doki Literature Club Plus gets itself a gold. It could have got a platinum, really.
What's holding it back?
Really, just that annoyance about the side stories, and you know, that may be just it. And it had to be almost flawless, I think, to get the platinum. Yeah, because they're not flawless games that I put in there. And And probably, once you've played it and consumed what you want from it, and you'll know when you want to end, basically, depending on if you want to go back to it. There's not really any replayability there. That's not reason to knock it, actually. They scratch that. It's just that it really is just the side stories, and sometimes the fucking rigmarole of getting those, and everything else though is pretty good. You could argue that if I was really into these games, it would have just got the platinum. But again, it's a genre I'm not really familiar with.
It's your decision. Ultimately, you grade it against everything else you've played in terms of how much you enjoyed it, and
it's really good.
So there's no criteria for it, really.
No, I just knew that when I ended it, I was like, that'll stick with me. And I thought, well, that says a story in itself, and that's sometimes enough these days. So that's the Doki Doki Literature Club Plus Gold. How about this as a question? You kind of alluded to it, probably unintentionally. But let's just ask the question anyway. What is the minimum criteria in terms of interactivity for something to be considered a game and not a book and not a movie, etc., etc.?
I always find this really tricky because...
Hodgson.
Well, when you're playing through a game... Like, you're playing through a story,
fucking
right?
Hell.
They're largely linear. But you've got an element of free reign in that story, and I think you've got to be. I feel like there's got to be a flavour that you bring to it. I think if there's just words on a screen, I'd say this visual novel. The difference is, I assume you're making decisions that take you down a certain road.
You can have input and influence over it, and that's...
Otherwise, if that ain't there, you're just turning a page on a book.
Those side stories are books, because you are just turning this page in it, but the actual main game does have elements of it. Like when you write the poems, for example, you're selecting the words and things like that, so like a small mini game. We're not going to sit here and say it's the most complex of things, but that's the level of interactivity you get.
I don't know what the exact definition is, but I think you've got to be, there's got to be some sort of challenge in it, either mechanically or through what you're doing. Like, you've got to have influence in an outcome somehow. So even if it's in a Spider-Man game, you're deciding how to take enemies down. Like, there's a challenge there. Like, you can't just stand there. Like, you'll just die. Like, so you have to defeat them. You have to actively do something to get to an output. But if that's not there, then you've got to be deciding the output. You've got to have input. There's got to be an input and an output. And if there ain't an input and an output, then
it's not.
It ain't a game, is it?
What if there's an input? You've got 3 inputs you can choose from. Let's just say, the route to output is different because the response is different from the character. But the actual output is the same regardless. You're just
I think when you play Spider-Man, like, the outputs are the same, really, for me and you.
Like the enemy dies. The
enemy dies.
Right.
It's just how you kill it, or what you use to kill it.
Interesting.
Or where you're positioned in the level, and strategy, I guess, is the way to put it. You've got a strategy. My strategy would have been different to yours, I suspect. So
less skilled,
and you've built your character accordingly, probably, and you've got different things equipped and different suits equipped that give you different buffs and debuffs and stuff. So there's a difference there. But I think, like, even when you get to the point where you think Football Manager, like, and you're just selecting players, that's what you're doing. You're buying the players, you're selecting the players, you're choosing a style of play, you're putting the input in. But you could win 38 games, and I could win 38 games, but the way that we did it is different. So I think this one straddles the line the finest. I think a visual novel, I think that is the closest to the line that you could probably get.
Yeah.
Because it's basically like a thingy game, what do you call it? Like like a Wolf Among Us, but
There's less.
one step further removed, almost one or two steps further removed.
There's less narrative choices to make, and there's no the interactivity's completely stripped away. You can't even wander around. So yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with that. That as long as there is some sort of imprint that the player puts. What I will say is that there's something about games that they always, not always, but you inherit the position of the character, and whether that's Peter Parker / Spider-Man, or in this case you yourself, like you inherit, you're part of the game essentially. It's like an avatar. You're nameless. They refer to you. They talk to you. There's something about that, just having that perspective, or feeling like you're involved in it in that way, that, and there's no way of quantifying this, but it just separates it into a video game. Did you ever go through that Bandersnatch on Netflix?
No.
So basically, it's a Black Mirror film, and at points in the film, you choose you change the narrative. You choose what happens next, essentially. But because it's presented as a film, you don't. It's not. A lot of people say that's a video game. And I was like, it kind of is, but then you never, as the audience, you're never really feeling like you're inheriting the person or you're part of it. Whereas the game, regardless of whether the interactivity is more or less than what Bandersnatch is, that usually you're feeling like you're part of the experience. So when things happen, they're a bit more impactful. At least they are for me. Whereas if you watch a standard film, you're not sitting there going, cool, I'm Arnie here. You're just enjoying what's being filtered out towards you. Bandersnatch was different because you could influence it, but you still had that barrier. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what that barrier is between.
It must be an element of role play. So there's this there's a difference, isn't there? I suppose this is part of it, and I don't know whether it ultimately defines whether it's a film or not. But you assume, as you say, you either assume yourself or you assume a role. Like you are role playing as a character. You are Kratos. You are Peter Parker. You are these different people. Even in Football Manager, I am role playing as a manager, right?
Yeah.
And that is, I guess, where the enjoyment comes out of. Whereas in a film, you're not part of it. You're just watching it unfold and enjoying the story. Whereas you're not role playing as Dwayne Johnson in a film or whatever. Like you're not watching that going, that's me. You're just you. So maybe it is this difference of perspective that changes it.
Because even simply just clicking the mouse to move the text along, although it's very simple, it's still just one part of interaction that just brings you closer to it.
Yeah,
like just having that control over it, for example, just changes your. You're no longer a viewer. I'm partaking in it. Yes, I'm just moving. It's no different from me reading the fucking book, really, and just tapping the fucking button on a Kindle or turning the page. But there's something about the way the game's presented to you, as you said, that you're part of the. In fact, you're playing a role, whether it's yourself or character, in this unfolding story. And it just immediately sets it in a different stratosphere.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's probably a fair point.
And just one last genre I want to tackle, the walking simulator. I assume in your perspective, because you're wandering around, because usually in those games, sometimes it's a linear story as well, but you're wandering around reading stuff and interacting. Is that just still enough? The fact that you're picking things up and choosing where to go next and maybe missing things or finding things that other people didn't find, just having the movement, is that enough for it to tick the box? Because a lot of people, that was the first ones that come along. People are like, they're not games. They ain't games, are they? Walking sim.
I mean,
knock it off.
I guess so. I think
he's guessed at it.
It doesn't have to be a finite thing. I mean, you pay for a film, you pay for a game, you pay for a book. There doesn't have to be a distinction necessarily between them. I think, again, if you're involved and role playing and actively moving that story forward by doing things, whatever the things it requires you to do to move it forward, then you are playing a game.
Yeah.
I think ultimately. So I think it's this sort of like, it's got to be ultimately the role playing element. Like you are, however it requires you, assuming a role in that story.
Yeah.
And a film and a TV series and stuff like that just don't do that for you, and neither does a book. So I think that is the ultimate distinction.
Yep. Solved it. It's been
Easy.
solved for people there, isn't it? They should be. That's it. Don't want to hear it. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus, officially a game. That's what we've said. And got yourself a gold for its troubles, so
Yeah.
might as well
I
end
think
it
we
on
have.
that.
I think that's exactly what we've said, yeah. Unbelievable.
Don't know what I'll play next.
Well, is it going to be another? Are you not ready for a big title? I'm sure you've got one lurking that you could play if you wanted to.
I won't actually. I know what I'm going to play next. I won't reveal it though, in case I don't commit to it.
But
But it's not a time-consuming project. That's all I'll say.
Interesting.
But
A teaser.
well, I assume when you finish Jusant, we'll get a little voice note of that. That'll appear somewhere.
Yeah.
And then we'll see about this Beat Cop and Coffee game maybe later on in the summer. We'll see.
Yeah.
See how things go. Helldiver's still off the menu, so struggling.
Good riddance. I shouldn't say that. It wasn't a good riddance, but still a decent little game. But I'm glad it's not still a thing in a weird kind of way.
No, yeah. You got to get geared up for Concord now.
What's that?
The Overwatch killer, not.
Oh yeah.
Right, that's it. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus Gold. And that's the end of it. And officially a video game. Nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.